Leisure time. Did you ever stop to think how much leisure time you really have? Some of us put our leisure time to good use. And some of us, Ken Michaels, for example, spend most of our leisure time just moping.
Moping? He thinks I'm moping. Well, who wouldn't mope? There's nothing to do, nobody's around. You know how it is. I went down to the bowling alley, went over to the drugstore. None of the gang was there. All my friends are busy, so what's for me to do?
Do you suppose Ken has more leisure time than his friends do?
Huh? Well, no, I don't have more time. We all spend about the same amount of time in school, and the rest is leisure time. I've got nothing to do but wait for supper. My friends have more things to do. They're lucky.
Ken's pretty lucky, too.
Listen to that. All right, I'll bite. Why am I lucky?
Because you have so much leisure time. Time in which you can do things you enjoy. Time in which you don't have to work.
Like this, huh? Is that good?
Let me show you a few things. Suppose you had lived 100 years ago. What would you have been like? Take a look.
Where? Oh, is that me? Is that what I would have looked like 100 years ago?
Well, perhaps. But now, well, let's look back 100 years again and see someone else.
Who? Hey, that's my dad.
Young man, you get off that bed and get to work. After you clean out the stable, you can build some new steps for the back porch. While I work 72 hours a week, no son of mine is going to loaf.
72 hours?
12 hours a day, 6 days a week. Tomorrow morning, young man, you're going out to get a regular job. You can work too, and earn your keep.
Not so good, Ken? Well, let's try another picture. Say about 50 years ago.
Oh, hello, son. Well, say, I've got some new pictures for the stereoscope. We'll look at them tonight. Don't forget about your chores. Have them all done by the time I'm through work. And keep the wood box full.
Boy, how long will you work, Dad?
Why, 10 hours. 10 hours a day, every day except Sunday.
60 hours a week? Boy.
Well, Ken, let's take a look at your father's time as it really is today.
Hi, Dad. You sure don't work as long hours as they used to.
That's right, Ken. It's a wonderful thing to be able to do so much work in so little time. This 40-hour week suits me fine. And some people even work shorter hours nowadays. But by the way, Ken, how'd you like to play a quick round of golf before supper? I think we can work it in. And then later I'd like to shellac that new bookcase I'm making.
Well, Ken?
Yes, Dad does enjoy his leisure time. And to think that a few years ago, people didn't have nearly so much time to themselves.
Yes, we've gained a lot of leisure time in the last century or so. All of us.
Wait a minute. All of us? Mother should hear you say that. She's always complaining that she doesn't have enough time.
Well, let's see about that. Can you picture your mother as she might have been 50 years ago?
I guess so.
My, that's hard work. It takes so much time, too. But that's woman's lot in life. Scrub clothes, carry water, bake bread, feed the chickens, till time to go to bed and then get up again to start all over again.
You see, Ken? Now, how about today?
My, this new washer certainly is a time saver. And I do need some extra time. Now, let's see, I want to do some shopping, but this first.
Wait a minute. This may be easier work, but it still looks like work.
Oh, well, I have to plan the program for the Women's Club next month. That's one of my favorite activities, you know. It does keep me busy, but, well, that's not work.
What do you think, Ken?
Well, Mother does have more leisure time now. But still, she's always busy. How does she find so many things to do? How can I find something to do with my extra time? Or for that matter, what about you? I don't know. It seems as if leisure time is a problem.
Well, let's see how your friends have met that problem.
I told him.
I had the wrong music. It's been a while since I've used it, so it went down there, and it was a bit difficult to find. I found it there. What the hell? Sorry, just give me a moment. I thought I disabled it. Okay. So can everyone tell me? Okay, sorry, hold on. Let me just let me reset. Hi, I am Philosopher. I'm the first and last philosopher vtuber, last librarian of Alexandria. And after a very long time, today we're finally going to read another Platonic dialogue. It's been a while. The first one we read was the Apology, and that was maybe, I want to say 2-3 months ago. I wanted to do one every month, but things have come up and different things have come up. Things came up in the channel, and then things came up in life, and then things came up in between, and it's all been a bit confusing, but that's to say that I wanted to do more of this, but I haven't, and you know, that's something I want to live up to a bit more, right? I want to read Plato a little more, considering the fact that I have him in my profile icon and everything, and so far I've only done one reading stream with him. It is a bit disingenuous, so I'm here to correct that mistake. And also, well, it was supposed to be sort of thematic. It was supposed to be a part of the month February where we would play video games about love. We would play dating sims, etc, etc. And I figured that it would be a good time to introduce the Symposium, because that's sort of relevant. Now, unfortunately, again, due to the circumstances stated very previously just now, I've not been able to do that in time, and that's why we're reading the Symposium on the 26th of March. Okay, my apologies. It is what it is. You're probably already used to it. Let's not kid ourselves, right? But regardless, okay. Regardless, what matters is that I keep all my promises, even if they are like 2 months late, okay? I'm still doing it. Everything I do, everything I say I'm gonna do, I do. It just takes a while and I'm a bit late, all right? That's how it usually is. I have a question for people now. Just that's completely off topic and completely unrelated to the stream. Right, but it's a very quick one I want to ask now because it's sort of confusing for me. Do you see like monetization stuff in the live chat? Because I didn't think it would be this quick. I thought it would take like a while. I thought it'd take like a month, because that's what YouTube said, but then they just got it done in a day or something, or 2 days. So I actually just have. Okay, I disabled it. I thought I was on my settings, and like I disabled it. So it shouldn't be here, because I don't want it to be here. I don't want it to be here yet. I don't want this yet. I've specifically I had in mind like a thing where I would do it in a later stream. And I was gonna, you know, call it like the capitalism update or something. You know, that was what I was gonna like. You know, that was just further down the line. I wanted to, like in like a week or two, I wanted it to like to enable it alongside other things and like make changes and like, you know, talk about the changes. That was all just like, but then you know, I was like fiddling through it to see how it worked earlier today, and so I had it turned off. It should be off in my settings. You know what? I'm just going. In fact, I'm going to check right now. Yeah, it's all disabled. All of the like earn on YouTube things, shit, they're enabled. I'm gonna disable them now. Yep, turn them off. Turn them off. Turn it 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 off. They were off a moment ago. Okay, I've turned them off now. Okay, they should be off. They should be off. They should be off. Shit. That's not what I intended. I didn't want to get this. This is just distracting. Okay, that's fine. That doesn't matter, but I just wanted to say that if you see that there, just ignore it. Just pretend like it's not the... Like, so when you do see it eventually, in maybe say like a week or 2 weeks, pretend like you're surprised, okay? Just pretend like this hasn't happened yet. Sorry, that was completely unrelated to Plato and the Symposium, but I wanted to bring that up because I wanted to make sure, I wanted to understand how this works. Okay, so again, just ignore that. Anyways, today we're reading the Symposium, which is a dialogue from Plato. It's one of the Platonic texts, and probably one of the more easier ones to get into, I will say. Essentially, the structure of it is, there's like 6 dudes or something, or 7 guys, and they each take turns. It's like a celebratory occasion, and they each take turns making a speech about love, or like how they see it, or what it is exactly. They all speculate on the nature of love, the nature of whatever it is. In the Greek, it's eros. The word is eros, and eros has certain translations that, you know, make it difficult exactly to talk about it the way we do in English, or at least exactly in one-to-one. But, you know, for the purposes of this, we're going to work with the Benjamin Jowett translation. Now, just a word of maybe not warning, but I guess it is warning, actually. A word of, or just to give you a preview, right? I'm not going to talk too much about the text and give my thoughts on it. The reason I'm not going to do that is because I want to probably save that for some other time, because because I don't think I'd be able to talk about it and also read it. Because there's quite a bit, even if you ignore... So in this version, translated by Benjamin Jowett, there's an introduction accompanying the Symposium, and the Symposium itself is quite long already. Okay, well, it's like up to here. It's quite long already. So my goal today is I just want to read it all. I just want to read this all, including the introduction here. And... Oh dear. Yeah, I don't know why it's... Sorry. I do know why, but you have to give me a second. Okay. Okay, you're just gonna have to live with this. Sorry. You are just going to have to live with the fact that some of the words are clipping out of it. But that's okay, because you can just pull up the text by yourself. Which I realize I haven't put up yet. I'm going to do that right now. Here is the text link. Gutenberg, or I can send these, right? Like, this doesn't get censored by YouTube or whatever. It's my channel. I feel as though I should have that right. It's in the description too. I think I've just updated it. So anyone who wants to click on that to read alongside it, that's great, I suppose. I'm also going to be reading the introduction. If anyone has any questions, you should ask them. You can ask them, and I will try my best to answer. But I'm a little like I reviewed a little bit. I reviewed a bit before we began stream Symposium, so I'm roughly familiar with the way the dialogue goes, and I've sort of gotten a refresher on what I'd learned of it many years ago. But I wasn't very. This wasn't my favorite dialogue. It wasn't the dialogue I was the best at either. But it was, but it was one of the ones I read. So, yeah. If anyone, but I suppose maybe to give a preview for the answer to the question, what does Socrates think of love? Socrates himself, from what I understand, Socrates thinks of himself as an amorist. I think that's the word. I wonder if that's here in the Wikipedia. It should be here. Okay. Never mind, it's not. But Socrates thinks of himself as an amorist. Maybe you're familiar with the word amor, but he claims he very rarely, as he is known as the master debater, he loves to interrogate people's views and reveal to them that they actually know nothing, right? And that he's the only one that knows that he knows nothing. Well, like whether or not you enjoy it, the contradiction, or you have a different way to explain it, in the Symposium and in some of Plato's other work, I believe as well, Socrates does make claims of love, or at least he claims that maybe he's the only one, or not he's the only one, but the only thing he knows is love. He is a lover, he likes to claim. He likes to say that all he really can say that he does claim to know would be love, right? That's how much he loves love, is that he's willing, it's the only thing he's willing to claim knowledge to, I suppose. Now, why is that? Because when you think of Socrates, you don't think the lover, you think the thinker, right? You think the debater, you think the annoying asshole in the city of Athens who, eventually got executed because of how much of a terrible influence he was to the children there, the youth there, right? Well, that's for you to find out, I suppose, if you have not familiarized yourself with Symposium yet. You have, or at least if you've read it, and or maybe if you've come about this stream again after having read or heard it the first time, Socrates, I don't know how to explain it. sorry, I hate to leave you in suspense, but well, all you need to know is Socrates claims to love very dearly, very strongly, very passionately. And at least the Platonic dialogues as we understand them now did, at the time of Western history, mark a shift from philosophy discussing the things that were sort of beyond our world, such as the matter of the world, whether or not change and flux is the essence of being, or is it something else. All of those things that are probably a bit more abstract and a bit more difficult to sort of, a bit more impersonal maybe. It marked a shift from that stuff to stuff that's a bit more human, maybe a bit easier to understand and like relate to in the human experience. Things such as justice, ideas such as justice, such as the acquisition of knowledge, such as love, such as virtue. All these things, the Platonic era sort of marked a shift towards. And in no small part because of, you know, several of the texts, such as the Symposium we have today. Okay, I'm getting him out of here. Yeah, so this is a reading stream. You know what it is. I'm just going to read the text. I'm going to read the I'm going to read the Symposium entry on Wikipedia briefly, though. The Symposium is a Socratic dialogue by Plato, dated c. 385 to 370 BC. It depicts a friendly contest of extemporaneous speeches given by a group of notable Athenian men attending a banquet. The men include the philosopher Socrates, the general and statesman Alcibiades. Give me a moment. Alcibiades. Okay. Alcibiades and the comic playwright Aristophanes. The panegyrics are to be given in praise of Eros, the god of love and sex. In the Symposium, Eros is recognized both as erotic lover and as a phenomenon capable of inspiring courage, valor, great deeds and works, and vanquishing man's natural fear of death. It is seen as transcending its earthly origins and attaining spiritual heights. The extraordinary elevation of the concept of love raises a question of whether some of the most extreme extents of meaning might be intended as humor or farce. Eros is almost translated as love, and the English word has its own varieties and ambiguities that provide additional challenges to the effort to understand the Eros of ancient Athens. The dialogue is one of Plato's major works, and is appreciated for both its philosophical content and its literary qualities. And I guess this was just to go down here. Yeah, the context is it's a banquet attended by a group of men coming to the Symposium. They're drinking and enjoying themselves, and they're each sort of lining up to give a speech. Principal characters include Phaedrus, Pausanias, Eryximachus, Aristophanes, Agathon, Socrates, and Alcibiades. Just making sure I got that one right. And they each give a speech. Yeah. It's itself much like a lot of the other dialogues written in the form that is like of a dialogue, right? Of a play. Maybe you can think of it that way. It's a bit theatrical in that respect. So if you want to imagine it that way, you want to close your eyes and imagine it that way as a scene more than it is a story, that works. That could work. Yeah. Okay, without further ado, where are we? And again, if anyone has any questions, ask away. Feel free to do so, please. And otherwise, here is Symposium by Plato, translated by Benjamin Jowett. I'm going to read the introduction and the Symposium text, hopefully soon enough that I'll be able to make food soon after I end the stream. Okay. Sorry, that's my chair. My chair has been upgraded, but that's come at the cost of it being louder because it's not really an upgrade. It's like someone else, like one of my neighbors had an extra chair. I was like, great, I'm in the market for a chair. I just hadn't been able to buy one yet. And so I just got like a chair from them. Anyways, sorry if you hear that's noise. That's because that's my loud, very loud, probably 10-year-old chair. All right. Anyways, introduction. Of all the works of Plato, the Symposium is the most perfect in form. It may be truly thought to contain more than any commentator has ever dreamed of, or, as Goethe said of one of his own writings, more than the author himself knew. For in philosophy, as in prophecy, glimpses of the future may often be conveyed in words, which could hardly have been understood or interpreted at the time when they were uttered, which were wiser than the writer of them meant. It could not have been expressed by him if he had been interrogated about them. Yet Plato was not a mystic, nor in any degree affected by the Eastern influences which afterwards overspread the Alexandrian world. He was not an enthusiast or a sentimentalist, but one who aspired only to see reasoned truth, and whose thoughts are clearly explained in his language. There's no foreign element either of Egypt or of Asia to be found in his writings, and more than any other Platonic work, the Symposium is Greek both in style and subject, having a beauty as of a statue, while the companion dialogue of Phaedrus is marked by a sort of Gothic irregularity. More, too, than in any other of his dialogues, Plato is emancipated from former philosophy. The genius of Greek art seems to triumph over the traditions of Pythagorean, Eleatic, or Megarian systems, and the old quarrel of poetry and philosophy has at least a superficial reconcilement. An unknown person who had heard of the discourses in praise of love spoken by Socrates and others at the banquet of Agathon is desirous of having an authentic account of them, which he thinks that he can obtain from Apollodorus, the same excitable or rather mad friend of Socrates, who is afterwards introduced in the Phaedo. He had imagined that the discourses were recent. There he is mistaken, but they are still fresh in the memory of his informant, who had just been repeating them to Glaucon, and is quite prepared to have another reversal of them in a walk from the Piraeus to Athens. Though he had not been present himself, he had heard them from the best authority. Aristodemus, who is described as having been in past times a humble but inseparable attendant of Socrates, had reported them to him. The narrative which he had heard was as follows. Aristodemus, meeting Socrates in holiday attire, is invited by him to a banquet at the house of Agathon, which had been sacrificing in thanksgiving for his tragic victory on the day previous. But no sooner has he entered the house than he finds that he is alone. Socrates has stayed behind in a fit of abstraction and does not appear until the banquet is half over. On his appearing, he and the host jest a little. The question is then asked by Pausanias, one of the guests, what shall they do about drinking? As they had all been well drunk on the day before, and drinking on 2 successive days is such a bad thing. This is confirmed by the authority of Eryximachus, the physician, who further proposes that instead of listening to the flute girl and her noise, they shall make speeches in honor of love, one after another, going from left to right in the order in which they are reclining at the table. All of them agree to this proposal, and Phaedrus, who is the father of the idea, which he has previously communicated to Eryximachus, begins as follows. He descants first of all upon the antiquity of love, which is proved by the authority of the poets. Secondly, upon the benefits which love gives to man. The greatest of these is the sense of honor and dishonor. The lover is ashamed to be seen by the beloved doing or suffering any cowardly or mean act, and a state or army which was made up only of lovers and their loves would be invincible. For love will convert the veriest coward into an inspired hero. And there have been true loves not only of men but of women also, such as the love of Alcestis, who dared to die for her husband, and in recompense of her virtue was allowed to come again from the dead. But Orpheus, the miserable harper, who went down to Hades alive that he might bring back his wife, was mocked with an apparition only, and the gods afterwards contrived his death as the punishment of his cowardliness. The love of Achilles, like that of Alcestis, was courageous and true, for he was willing to avenge his lover Patroclus, although he knew that his own death would immediately follow. And the gods, who honor the love of the beloved above that of the lover, rewarded him and sent him to the islands of the blessed. Pausanias, who was sitting next, then takes up the tale. He says that Phaedrus should have distinguished the heavenly love from the earthly before he praised either, for there are two loves, as there are 2 Aphrodites. One, the daughter of Uranus, who has no mother and is the elder and wiser goddess, and the other the daughter of Zeus and Dione, who is popular and common. The first of the 2 loves has a noble purpose, and delights only in the intelligent nature of man, and is faithful to the end, and has no shadow of wantonness or lust. The second is the coarser kind of love, which is a love of the body rather than of the soul, and is of women and boys as well as of men. Now, the actions of lovers vary, like every other sort of action, according to the manner of their performance. And in different countries there is a difference of opinion about male loves. Some, like the Boeotians, approve of them, others, like the Ionians, and most of the barbarians, disapprove of them, partly because they are aware of the political dangers which ensue from them, as may be seen in the instance of Harmodius and Aristogiton. At Athens and Sparta there is an apparent contradiction about them. For at times they are encouraged, and then the lover is allowed to play all sorts of fantastic tricks. He may swear and forswear himself, and at lovers, perjuries, they say, Jove laughs. He may be a servant and lie on a mat at the door of his love, without any loss of character. But there are also times when elders look grave and guard their young relations, and personal remarks are made. The truth is that some of these loves are disgraceful and others honorable. The vulgar love of the body, which takes wing and flies away when the bloom of youth is over, is disgraceful, and so is the interested love of power or wealth. but the love of the noble mind is lasting. The lover should be tested, and the beloved should not be too ready to yield. The rule in our country is that the beloved may do the same service to the lover in the way of virtue which the lover may do to him. A voluntary service to be rendered for the sake of virtue and wisdom is permitted among us, and when these two customs, one the love of youth, the other practice of virtue and philosophy, meet in one, then the lovers may lawfully unite. Nor is there any disgrace to a disinterested lover in being deceived, but the interested lover is doubly disgraced. For if he loses his love, he loses his character. Whereas the noble love of the other remains the same, although the object of his love is unworthy, for nothing can be nobler than love for the sake of virtue. This is what love of the heavenly goddess, which is of great price to individuals and cities, making them work together for their improvement. The turn of Aristophanes comes next, but he has the hiccough, and therefore proposes that Eryximachus the physician shall cure him or speak in his turn. Eryximachus is ready to do both, and after prescribing for the hiccough, speaks as follows. He agrees with Pausanias in maintaining that there are two kinds of love, but his art has led him to the further conclusion that the empire of this double love extends over all things, and is to be found in animals and plants as well as in man. In the human body also there are two loves. The art of medicine shows which is the good and which is the bad love, and persuades the body to accept the good and reject the bad, and reconciles conflicting elements and makes them friends. Every art, gymnastic, and husbandry, as well as medicine, is the reconciliation of opposites. And this is what Heraclitus meant when he spoke of a harmony of opposites, but in strictness he should rather have spoken of a harmony which succeeds opposites, for an agreement of disagreements there cannot be. Music, too, is concerned with the principles of love and their application to harmony and rhythm. In the abstract all is simple, and we are not troubled with the twofold love, but when they are applied in education with their accompaniments of song and meter, then the discord begins. Then the old tale has to be repeated for fair Urania and the coarse Polyhymnia, who must be indulged sparingly, just as in my own art of medicine care must be taken that the taste of the epicure be gratified without inflicting upon him the attendant penalty of disease. There is a similar harmony or disagreement in the course of the seasons and in the relations of moist and dry, hot and cold, hoar frost and blight. Hoar frost and blight, and diseases of all sorts spring from the excesses or disorders of the element of love. The knowledge of these elements of love and discord in the heavenly bodies is termed astronomy. In the relations of men towards gods and parents is called divination. For divination is the peacemaker of gods and men, and works by a knowledge of the tendencies of merely human loves to piety and impiety. Such is the power of love, and that love which is just and temperate has the greatest power, and is the source of all our happiness and friendship with the gods and with one another. I dare say that I have omitted to mention many things which you, Aristophanes, may supply, as I perceive that you are cured of the hiccough. Aristophanes is the next speaker. He professes to open a new vein of discourse, in which he begins by treating of the origin of human nature. The sexes were originally three, men, women, and the union of the two, and they were made round, having 4 hands, 4 feet, 2 faces on a round neck, and the rest to correspond. Terrible was their strength and swiftness, and they were essaying to scale heaven and attack the gods. Doubt reigned in the celestial councils. The gods were divided between the desire of quelling the pride of man and the fear of losing the sacrifices. At last, Zeus hit upon an expedient. Let us cut them in two, he said. Then they will only have half their strength, and we shall have twice as many sacrifices. He spake and split them, as you might split an egg with an air. And when this was done, he told Apollo to give their faces a twist and rearrange their persons, taking out the wrinkles and tying the skin in a knot about the navel. The two halves went about looking for one another and were ready to die of hunger in one another's arms. Then Zeus invented an adjustment of the sexes, which enabled them to marry and go their way to the business of life. Now the characters of men differ accordingly as they are derived from the original man or the original woman or the original man-woman. Those who come from the man-woman are lascivious and adulterous. Those who come from the woman form female attachments. Those who are a section of the male follow the male and embrace him, and in him all their desires center. The pair are inseparable and live together in pure and manly affection. Yet they cannot tell what they want of another. But if Hephaestus were to come to them, with his instruments and proposed that they should be melted into one and remain one here and after. They would acknowledge that this was the very expression of their want. For love is the desire of the whole, and the pursuit of the whole is called love. There was a time when the two sexes were only one, but now God has halved them, much as the Lacedaemonians have cut up the Arcadians. And if they do not behave themselves, it will divide them again, and they will hop about with half a nose and a face in basso relievo. Wherefore let us exhort all men to piety, that we may obtain the goods of which love is the author, and be reconciled to God, and find our own true loves, which rarely happens in this world. And now, I must beg you not to suppose that I am alluding to Pausanias and Agathon, for my words refer to all mankind everywhere. Some raillery ensues, first between Aristophanes and Eryximachus, and then between Agathon, who fears a few select friends more than any number of spectators at the theatre, and Socrates, who is disposed to begin an argument. This is speedily repressed by Phaedrus, who reminds the disputants of their tribute to the god. Agathon's speech follows. He will speak of the god first, and then of his gifts. He is the fairest and blessedest and the best of the gods, and also the youngest, having had no existence in the old days of Iapetus and Kronos, when the gods were at war. The things that were done then were done of necessity and not of love. For love is young and dwells in soft places, not like Ati and Homer, walking on the skulls of men, but in their hearts and souls, which are soft enough. He is all flexibility and grace, and his habitation is among the flowers, and he cannot do or suffer wrong, for all men serve and obey him of their own free will. And where there is love, there is obedience, and where obedience, there is justice, for none can be wronged of his own free will. And he is temperate as well as just, for he is the ruler of the desires, and if he rules them, he must be temperate. Also, he is courageous, for he is the conqueror of the Lord of War. And he is wise too, for he is a poet, and the author of poesy and others. He created the animals, he is the inventor of the arts, all the gods are his subjects. He is the fairest and best himself, and the cause of what is fairest and best in others. He makes men to be of one mind at a banquet, filling them with affection and emptying them of disaffection. The pilot, helper, defender, savior of men, in whose footsteps let every man follow, chanting a strain of love. Such is the discourse, half playful, half serious, which I dedicate to the god. The turn of Socrates comes next. He begins by remarking satirically that he has not understood the terms of the original agreement, for he fancied that they meant to speak the true praises of love, but now he finds that they only saw what is good of him, whether true or false. He begs to be absolved from speaking falsely, but he is willing to speak the truth, and proposes to begin by questioning Agathon. Of course he does. The result of his questions may be summed up as follows. Love is of something, and that which love desires is not that which love is or has, for no man desires that which he is or has, and love is of the beautiful, and therefore has not the beautiful. The beautiful is the good, and therefore in wanting and desiring the beautiful, love also wants and desires the good. Socrates professes to have asked the same questions and to have obtained the same answers from Diotima, a wise woman of Mantinea, who, like Agathon, had spoken first of love and then of his works. Socrates, like Agathon, had told her that love is a mighty god and also fair, and she had shown him in return that love was neither, but in a mean between fair and foul, good and evil, and not a god at all, but only a great demon or intermediate power. Compare the speech of Eryximachus, who conveys to the gods the prayers of man, and to the men the commands of the gods. Socrates asks, who are his father and mother? To this, Diotima replies that he is the son of Flentian poverty, and partakes of the nature of both, and is full and starved by turns. Like his mother, he is poor and squalid, lying on mats at doors. Compare the sweet speech of Pausanias. Like his father, he is bold and strong, and full of arts and resources. Further, he is in a mean between ignorance and knowledge. In this he resembles the philosopher, who is also in a mean between the wise and the ignorant. Such is the nature of love, who is not to be confused with the beloved. For love desires the beautiful, and then arises the question, what does he desire of the beautiful? He desires, of course, the possession of the beautiful, but what is given by that? For the beautiful lets us substitute the good, and we have no difficulty in seeing the possession of the good to be happiness, and love to be the desire of happiness, although the meaning of the word has been too often confined to one kind of love. And love desires not only the good, but the everlasting possession of the good. Why then is there all this flutter and excitement about love? because all men and women at a certain age are desirous of bringing to the birth. And love is not of beauty only, but of birth in beauty. This is the principle of immortality in a mortal creature. When beauty approaches, then the conceiving power is benign and diffuse. When foulness, she is averted and morose. But why again does this extend not only to men but also to animals? Because they too have an instinct of immortality. Even in the same individual, there is a perpetual succession, as well of parts of the material body as of the thoughts and desires of the mind. Nay, even knowledge comes and goes. There is no sameness of existence, but the new mortality is always taking the place of the old. This is the reason why parents love their children, for the sake of immortality, and this is why men love the immortality of fame. For the creative soul creates not children, but conceptions of wisdom and virtue, such as poets and other creators have invented. And the noblest creations of all are those of legislators, in honor of whom temples have been raised, who would not sooner have these children of the mind than the ordinary human does. I will now initiate you, she said, into the greater mysteries, for he who would proceed in due course should love first one fair form, and then many, and learn the connection of them. And from beautiful bodies he should proceed to beautiful minds, and the beauty of laws and institutions, until he perceives that all beauty is of one kindred. And from institutions he should go on to the sciences, until at last the vision is revealed to him of a single science of universal beauty. Then he will behold the everlasting nature which is the cause of all, and will be near the end. In the contemplation of that supreme being of love, he will be purified of earthly leaven, and will behold beauty, not with the bodily eye, but with the eye of the mind, and will bring forth true creations of virtue and wisdom, and be the friend of God and heir of immortality. Such, Phaedrus, is the tale which I heard from the stranger of Mantinea, and which you may call the encomium of love, or what you please. The company applaud the speech of Socrates, and Aristophanes is about to say the same thing. About to say something, when suddenly a band of revelers breaks into the court, and the voice of Alcibiades is heard asking for Agathon. He is led in drunk and welcomed by Agathon, whom he has come to crown with a garland. He is placed on a couch at his side, but suddenly on recognizing Socrates, he starts up, and a sort of conflict is carried on between them. When Agathon is requested to appease, Alcibiades then insists that they shall drink, and has a large wine cooler filled, which he first empties himself and then fills again, passes on to Socrates. He is informed of the nature of the entertainment and is ready to join, if only in the character of a drunken and disappointed lover he may be allowed to sing the praises of Socrates. He begins by comparing Socrates first to the busts of Silenus, which have images of the gods inside them, and secondly to Marsyas, the flute player. For Socrates produces the same effect with the voice which Marsyas did with the flute. He is the great speaker and enchanter who ravishes the soul of man, the convincer of hearts too, as he has convinced Alcibiades and made him ashamed of his mean and miserable life. Socrates at one time seemed about to fall in love with him, and he thought that he would thereby gain a wonderful opportunity of receiving lessons of wisdom. He narrates the failure of his design. He has suffered agonies from him, and is at his wit's end. He then proceeds to mention some other particulars of the life of Socrates, how they were at Paideia together, where Socrates showed his superior powers of enduring cold and fatigue, how on one occasion he had stood for an entire day and night, absorbed in reflection amid the wonder of the spectators, how on another occasion he had saved Alcibiades' life, how at the Battle of Delium, after the defeat, he might be seen stalking about like a pelican, rolling his eyes at Aristophanes, as Aristophanes had described him in the clouds. He is the most wonderful of human beings, and absolutely unlike anyone but a satyr, like the satyr in his language too, for he uses the commonest words as the outward mask of the divinest truth. When Alcibiades had done speaking, a dispute begins between him and Agathon and Socrates. Socrates piques Alcibiades by a pretended affection for Agathon. Presently, a band of revelers appears who introduce disorder into the feast. The sober part of the company, Eryximachus, Phaedrus, and others withdraw, and Aristodemus, the follower of Socrates, sleeps during the whole of a long winter's night. When he wakes at cockcrow, the revelers are nearly all asleep. Only Socrates, Aristophanes, and Agathon hold out. They are drinking from a large goblet, which they pass around, and Socrates is explaining to the others, who are half asleep, that the genius of tragedy is the same as that of comedy, and that the writer of tragedy ought to be a writer of comedy also. And first, Aristophanes drops, and then, as the day is dawning, Agathon, Socrates, having laid them to rest, takes a bath and goes to his daily avocations until the evening. I was taught him as follows. If it be true that there are more things in the Symposium of Plato than any commentator has dreamed of, it is also true that many things have been imagined which are really not meant to be found there. Some writings hardly admit of a more distinct interpretation than a musical composition, and every reader may form his own accompaniment of thought or feeling to the strain which he hears. The Symposium of Plato is a work of this character, and can with difficulty be rendered in any words but the writer's own. There are so many half-lights and cross-lights, so much of the colour of mythology and of the manner of sophistry adhering, rhetoric and poetry, the playful and the serious, are so subtly intermingled in it, and the vestiges of old philosophy are so curiously blended with germs of future knowledge, that agreement among interpreters is not to be expected. The expression poema magis putandum quam comicorum poetarum, which has been applied to all the writings of Plato, is especially applicable to the Symposium. The power of love is represented in the Symposium as running through all nature and all being, at one's end descending to animals and plants and attaining to the highest vision of truth at the other. In an age when man was seeking for an expression of the world around him, the conception of love greatly affected him. One of the first distinctions of language and of mythology was that of gender, and at a later period the ancient physicist, anticipating modern science, saw, or thought that he saw, a sex in plants. There were elective affinities among the elements, marriages of earth and heaven. Love became a mythic personage, whom philosophy, borrowing from poetry, converted into an efficient cause of creation. The traces of the existence of love, as of number and figure, were everywhere discerned, and in the Pythagorean list of opposites, male and female were ranged side by side with odd and even, finite and infinite. But Plato seems also to be aware that there is a mystery of love in man as well as in nature, extending beyond the mere immediate relation of the sexes. He is conscious that the highest and noblest things in the world are not easily severed from the sensual desires, or may even be regarded as a spiritualized form of them. We may observe that Socrates himself is not represented as originally unimpassioned, but as one who has overcome his passions. The secret of his power over others partly lies in his passionate but self-controlled nature. In the Phaedrus and Symposium, love is not merely the feeling usually so called, but the mystical contemplation of the beautiful and the good. The same passion which may wallow in the mire is capable of rising to the loftiest heights, for penetrating the inmost secret of philosophy. The highest love is the love not of a person, but of the highest and purest abstraction. This abstraction is the far-off heaven, on which the eye of the mind is fixed in fond amazement. The unity of truth, the consistency of the warring elements of the world, and the enthusiasm for knowledge when first beaming upon mankind. The relativity of ideas to the human mind, and of the human mind to the ideas, to the faith in the invisible, the adoration of the eternal nature, are all included, consciously or unconsciously, in Plato's doctrine of love. The successive speeches in praise of love are characteristic of the speakers, and contribute in various degrees to the final result. They are all designed to prepare the way for Socrates, who gathers up the threads anew and skims the highest point of each of them. They are not to be regarded as the stages of an idea, rising above one another to a climax. They are fanciful, partly facetious performances, yet also having a certain measure of seriousness, which the successive speakers dedicate to the god. All of them are rhetorical and poetical rather than dialectical, but glimpses of truth appear in them. When Eryximachus says that the principles of music are simple in themselves, but confused in their application, he touches lightly upon a difficulty which has troubled the moderns as well as the ancients in music, and may be extended to the other applied sciences. That confusion begins in the concrete, as was the natural feeling of a mind dwelling in the world of ideas. When Pausanias remarks that personal attachments are inimical to despots, the experience of Greek history confirms the truth of his remark. When Aristophanes declares that love is the desire of the whole, he expresses a feeling not unlike that of the German philosopher, who says that philosophy is homesickness. When Agathon says that no man can be wronged of his own free will, he is alluding playfully to a serious problem of Greek philosophy. So naturally, does Plato mingle jest and earnest, truth and opinion in the same work. The characters of Phaedrus, who have been the cause of more philosophical discussions than any other man, with the exception of Simmias the Theban Phaedrus, of Aristophanes, of who disguises under comic imagery a serious purpose, of Agathon, who in later life is satirized by Aristophanes in the Thesmophoria Zeussae, for his effeminate manners and the feeble rhythms of his verse, of Alcibiades, who is the same strange contrast of great powers and great vices, which meets us in history, are drawn to life, and we may suppose the lesser-known characters of Pausanias and Eryximachus to be also true to the traditional recollection of them. We may also remark that Aristodemus is called the Little in Xenophon's Memorabilia. The speeches have been said to follow each other in pairs, Phaedrus and Pausanias being the ethical, Eryximachus and Aristophanes the physical speakers, while in Agathon and Socrates poetry and philosophy blend together. The speech of Phaedrus is also described as the mythological, that of Pausanias as the political, that of Eryximachus as the scientific, that of Aristophanes as the artistic, that of Socrates as the philosophical. But these and similar distinctions are not found in Plato. They are the points of view of his critics and seem to impede rather than to assist us in understanding him. My mouse is dead. Give me a second. Sorry about that. When the turn of Socrates comes round, he cannot be allowed to disturb the arrangement made at first. With the leave of Phaedrus, he asks a few questions, and then he throws his argument into the form of a speech. But his speech is really the narrative of a dialogue between himself and Diotima. And as at a banquet, good manners would not allow him to win a victory, either over his host or of any guests, the superiority which he gains over Agathon is ingeniously represented as having been already gained over himself by her. The artifice has the further advantage of maintaining his accustomed profession of ignorance. Even his knowledge of the mysteries of love, to which he lays claim here and elsewhere, is given by Diotima. The speeches are attested to us by the very best authority, the madman Apollodorus, who for 3 years past has made a daily study of the actions of Socrates, to whom the world is summed up in the words, "Great is Socrates." He has heard them from another madman, Aristodemus, who was the shadow of Socrates in days of old, like him going about barefooted, and who had been present at the time. Would you desire better witness? The extraordinary narrative of Alcibiades is ingeniously represented as admitted by Socrates, whose silence when he is invited to contradict gives consent to the narrator. We may observe, by the way, how the very appearance of Aristodemus by himself is a sufficient indication to Agathon that Socrates has been left behind. Also, how the courtesy of Agathon anticipates the excuse which Socrates was to have made on Aristodemus' behalf for coming uninvited. How the story of the fit or trance of Socrates is confirmed by the mention which Alcibiades makes of a similar fit of abstraction occurring when he was serving with the army at Putidea, like the drinking powers of Socrates and his love of the fair, which receive a similar attestation in the concluding scene, or the attachment of Aristodemus, who is not forgotten when Socrates takes his departure. We may notice the manner in which Socrates himself regards the first 5 speeches not as true, but as fanciful and exaggerated encomiums of the god of love. The satirical character of them, shown especially in the appeals to mythology, in the reasons which are given by Zeus for reconstructing the frame of a man, or by the Boeotians and the Eleans for encouraging male loves, the ruling passion of Socrates for dialectics, who will argue with Agathon instead of making a speech, and will only speak at all upon the condition that he is allowed to speak the truth. We may note also the touch of Socratic irony, which admits of a wide application and reveals a deep insight into the world, that in speaking of holy things and persons, there is a general understanding that you should praise them, not that you should speak the truth about them. This is the sort of praise which Socrates is unable to give. Lastly, we may remark that the banquet is a real banquet after all, at which love is the theme of discourse and huge quantities of wine are drunk. The discourse of Phaedrus is half mythical, half ethical, and he himself, true to the character which is given him in the dialogue bearing his name, is half sophist, half enthusiast. He is the critic of poetry also, who compares Homer and Aeschylus, Aeschylus in the insipid and irrational manner of the schools of the day, characteristically reasoning about the probability of matters which do not admit of reasoning. He starts from a noble text, that without the sense of honor and dishonor neither states nor individuals ever do any good or great work. But he soon passes on to more commonplace topics, the antiquity of love, the blessings of having a lover, the incentive which love offers to daring deeds, the examples of Alcestis and Achilles, are the chief themes of his discourse. The love of women is regarded by him as almost on an equality with that of men, and he makes the singular remark that the gods favor the return of love, which is made by the beloved more than the original sentiment, because the lover is of a nobler and diviner nature. There is something of a sophistical ring in the speech of Phaedrus, which recalls the first speech in imitation of Lysias, occurring in the dialogue called the Phaedrus. This is still more marked in the speech of Pausanias which follows, and which is at once hyperlogical in form and also extremely confused and pedantic. Plato is attacking the logical feebleness of the sophists and rhetoricians through their pupils, not forgetting, by the way, to satirize the monotonous and unmeaning rhythms which Prodicus and others were introducing into Attic prose. Of course, he is playing both sides of the game, as in the Gorgias and of Pausanias for Agathon has already been touched upon in the Protagoras? I'm sorry, it's... sorry. And is alluded to by Aristophanes. Hence he is naturally the upholder of male loves, which, like all the other affections or actions of men, he regards as varying according to the manner of their performance. Like the sophists and like Plato himself, though in a different sense, he begins his discussion by an appeal to mythology, and distinguishes between the elder and younger love. The value which he attributes to such loves as motives to virtue and philosophy is at variance with modern and Christian notions, but is in accordance with Hellenic sentiment. The opinion of Christendom has not altogether condemned passionate friendships between persons of the same sex, but has certainly not encouraged them, because though innocent in themselves, in a few temperaments they are liable to degenerate into fearful evil. Pausanias is very earnest in the defense of such loves, and he speaks of them as generally approved among Hellenists and disapproved by barbarians. His speech is more words than matter, and might have been composed by a pupil of Lysias, or of Prodicus, although there is no hint given that Plato is specially referring to them. As Eryximachus says, he makes a fair beginning but a lame ending. Plato transposes the two next speeches, as in the Republic he would transpose the virtues and the mathematical sciences. This is done partly to avoid monotony, partly for the sake of making Aristophanes the cause of wit in others, and also in order to bring the comic and tragic poet into juxtaposition, as if by accident. A suitable expectation of Aristophanes is raised by the ludicrous circumstance of his having the hiccough, which is appropriately cured by his substitute, the physician Eryximachus. To Eryximachus, love is the good physician. He sees everything as an intelligent physicist, and, like many professors of his art in modern times, attempts to reduce the moral to the physical, or recognizes one law of love which pervades them both. There are loves and strifes of the body as well as of the mind. Like Hippocrates, the Asclepiad, he is a disciple of Heraclitus, whose conception of harmony of opposites he explains in a new way as the harmony after discord. To his common sense, as to that of many moderns as well as ancients, the identity of contradictories is an absurdity. His notion of love may be summed up as the harmony of man with himself, and soul as well as body, and of all things in heaven and earth with one another. Aristophanes is ready to laugh and make laugh before he opens his mouth, just as Socrates, true to his character, is ready to argue before he begins to speak. He expresses the very genius of the old comedy, its coarse and forcible imagery, and the license of its language in speaking about the gods. He has no sophistical notions about love, which is brought back by him to its common sense meaning of love between intelligent beings. His account of the origin of the sexes is the greatest comic probability and verisimilitude. Nothing in Aristophanes is more truly Aristophanic than the description of the human monster, whirling round on 4 arms and legs, 8 in all, with incredible rapidity. Yet there is a mixture of earnestness in this jest. 3 serious principles seem to be insinuated. First, that man cannot exist in isolation. He must be reunited if he is to be perfected. Secondly, that love is the mediator and reconciler of poor, divided human nature. Thirdly, that the loves of this world are an indistinct anticipation of an ideal union, which is not yet realized. The speech of Agathon is conceived in a higher strain and receives the real, if half-ironical, approval of Socrates. It is the speech of the tragic poet in a sort of poem, like tragedy, moving among the gods of Olympus and not among the elder or Orphic deities. In the idea of the antiquity of love, he cannot agree. Love is not of the olden time, but present and youthful ever. The speech may be compared with that speech of Socrates in the Phaedrus, in which he describes himself as talking dithyrambs. It is at once a preparation for Socrates and a foil to him. The rhetoric of Agathon elevates the soul to sunlit heights, but at the same time contrasts with the natural and necessary eloquence of Socrates. Agathon contributes to the distinction between love and the works of love, and also hints incidentally that love is always of beauty, which Socrates afterwards raises into principle. While the consciousness of discord is stronger in the comic poet Aristophanes, Agathon, the tragic poet, has a deeper sense of harmony and reconciliation, and speaks of love as the creator and artist. All the earlier speeches embody common opinions colored with a tinge of philosophy. They furnish the material out of which Socrates proceeds to form his discourse, starting, as in other places, from mythology and the opinions of men. From Phaedrus, he takes the thought that love is stronger than death. From Pausanias, that the true love is akin to intellect and political activity. From Eryximachus, that love is a universal phenomenon and the great power of nature. From Aristophanes, that love is the child of want and is not merely the love of the congenial or of the whole, but, as he adds, of the good. From Agathon, that love is of beauty, not however of beauty only, but of birth in beauty. As it would be out of character for Socrates to make a lengthened harangue, the speech takes the form of a dialogue between Socrates and a mysterious woman of foreign extraction. She elicits the final truth from one who knows nothing, and who, speaking by the lips of another, and himself a despiser of rhetoric, is proved also to be the most consummate of rhetoricians. The last of the 6 discourses begins with a short argument which overthrows not only Agathon but all the preceding speakers by the help of a distinction which has escaped them. Extravagant praises have been ascribed to love as the author of every good. No sort of encomium was too high for him, whether deserved and true or not. But Socrates has no talent for speaking anything but the truth, and if he is to speak the truth of love, he must honestly confess that he is not a good at all. For love is of the good, and no man can desire that which he has. This piece of dialectics is ascribed to Diotima, who has already urged upon Socrates the argument which he urges against Agathon. That the distinction is a fallacy is obvious. It is almost acknowledged to be so by Socrates himself. For he who has beauty or good may desire more of them, and he who has beauty or good in himself may desire beauty and good in others. The fallacy seems to arise out of a confusion between the abstract ideas of good and beauty, which do not admit of degrees, and their partial realization in individuals. But Diotima, the prophetess of Mantinea, whose sacred and superhuman character raises her above the ordinary proprieties of women, has taught Socrates far more than this about the art and mystery of love. She has taught him that love is another aspect of philosophy. The same want in the human soul, which is satisfied in the vulgar by the procreation of the children, may become the highest aspiration of the intellectual desire. As the Christian might speak of hungering and thirsting after righteousness, or of divine loves under the figure of human. As the medieval saint might speak of the frutio Dei. As Dante saw all things contained in his love of Beatrice, so Plato would have us absorb all other loves and desires in the love of knowledge. Here's the beginning of Neoplatonism, or rather perhaps a proof. of which there are many, that the so-called mysticism of the East was not strange to the Greek of the 5th century before Christ. The first tumult of the affections was not wholly subdued. There were longings of a creature moving about in worlds not realized, which no art could satisfy. To most men, reason and passion appear to be antagonistic, both in idea and fact. The union of the greatest comprehension of knowledge and the burning intensity of love is a contradiction in nature, which may have existed in a far-off primeval age in the mind of some Hebrew prophet or some Eastern sage, but has now become an imagination only. Yet this passion of the reason is the theme of the Symposium of Plato. And as there is no impossibility in supposing that one king or son of a king may be a philosopher, so also there is a possibility, or probability, that there may be some few, perhaps one or two in a whole generation, in whom the light of truth may not lack the warmth of desire. And if there be such natures, no one will be disposed to deny that from them flew the most of the benefits of individuals and states. And even from imperfect combinations of the two elements in teachers or statesmen, great good may often arise. Yet there is a higher region in which love is not only felt but satisfied, in the perfect beauty of eternal knowledge, beginning with the beauty of earthly things, and at last reaching a beauty in which all existence is seen to be harmonious and one. The limited affection is enlarged and enabled to behold the ideal of all things. And here, the highest summit which is reached in the Symposium is seen also to be the highest summit which is attained in the Republic, but approached from another side, and there is a way, upwards and downwards, which is the same and not the same in both. The ideal beauty of the one is the ideal good of the other, regarded not with the eye of the knowledge, but of faith and desire, and they are respectively the source of beauty and the source of good in all other things. And by the steps of a ladder reaching to heaven, we pass from images of visible beauty and from the hypotheses of the mathematical sciences, which are not yet based upon the idea of good, through the concrete to the abstract, and by different paths arriving, behold the vision of the eternal. Under one aspect, the idea is love, under another, truth. In both, the lover of wisdom is the spectator of all time and of all existence. This is a mystery, in which Plato also obscurely intimates the union of the spiritual and fleshly, the interpenetration of the moral and intellectual faculty. The divine image of beauty which resides within Socrates has been revealed. The Silenus, or outward man, has now to be exhibited. The description of Socrates follows immediately after the speech of Socrates. One is the complement of the other. At the height of divine inspiration, when the force of nature can no further go, by way of contrast to this extreme idealism, Alcibiades, ashamed to make known if he had been sober, the state of his affections towards Socrates, unintelligible to us and perverted as they appear, affords an illustration of the power ascribed to the loves of man in the speech of Pausanias. He does not suppose his feelings to be peculiar to himself. There are several other persons in the company who have been equally in love with Socrates, and like himself have been deceived by him. The singular part of this confession is the combination of the most degrading passion with the desire of virtue and improvement. Such an union is not wholly untrue to human nature, which is capable of combining good and evil in a degree beyond what we can easily conceive. In imaginative persons, especially the god and the beast in man, seem to be part asunder more than is natural in a well-regulated mind. The Platonic Socrates, for of the real Socrates this may be doubted, compare his public rebuke of Critias for his shameful love of Euthydemus in Xenophon. Does not regard the greatest evil of Greek life as a thing not to be spoken of, but it has a ridiculous element, and is a subject for irony no less than for moral reprobation. It is also used as a figure of speech which no one interpreted literally. Nor does Plato feel any repugnance, such as would be felt in modern times, at bringing his greater master and hero into the connection with nameless crimes. He is contented with representing him as a saint who has won the Olympian victory over the temptations of human nature. The fault of taste, which to us is so glaring and which was recognized by the Greeks of a later age, was not perceived by the beauty of young men and boys, which was alone capable of inspiring the modern feeling of romance in the Greek mind. The passion of love took the spurious form of an enthusiasm for the ideal of beauty, a worship as of some godlike image of an Apollo or Antinous. But the love of youth, when not depraved, was a love of virtue and modesty as well as of beauty, the one being the expression of the other. And in certain Greek states, especially at Sparta and Thebes, The honorable attachment of a youth to an elder man was a part of his education. The army of lovers and their beloved who would be invincible if they could be united by such a tie is not a mere fiction of Plato's, but seems actually to have existed at Thebes in the day of Epaminondas and Pelopidus, if we may believe writers cited anonymously by Plutarch Pelop. It is observable that Plato never in the least degrees excuses the depraved love of the body, nor is there any Greek writer of mark who condones or approves such connections. But owing partly to the puzzling nature of the subject, these friendships are spoken of by Plato in a manner different from that of customary among ourselves. To most of them we should hesitate to ascribe any more than to the attachment of Achilles and Patroclus in Homer, an immoral or licentious character. There were many doubtless to whom the love of the fair mind was the noblest form of friendship, and who deemed the friendship of man with man to be higher than the love of woman, because although altogether separated from the bodily appetites, the existence of such attachments may be reasonably attributed to the inferiority and seclusion of women, and the want of a real family or social life and parental influence in Hellenic cities, and they were encouraged by the practice of gymnastic exercises, by the meetings of political clubs, and by the tie of military companionship. They were also an educational institution. A young person was especially entrusted by his parents to some elder friend, who was expected by them to train their son in manly exercises and in virtue. It is not likely that a Greek parent committed him to a lover, any more than we should to a schoolmaster, in the expectation that he would be corrupted by him, but rather in the hope that his morals would be better cared for than was possible in a great household of slaves. It is difficult to adduce the authority of Plato either for or against such practices or customs, because it is not always easy to determine whether he is speaking of the heavenly and philosophical love or of the coarse polyhymnia, and he often refers to this half in jest, yet with a certain degree of seriousness. We observe that they entered into one part of the old Greek comedy, as it has been in other ages and countries. But effeminate love was always condemned as well as ridiculed by the comic poets, and in the new comedy the allusions to such topics have disappeared. They seem to have been no longer tolerated by the greater refinement of the age. False sentiment is found in the lyric and elegiac poets. And in mythology, the greatest of the gods is not exempt from evil imputations. But the morals of a nation are not to be judged of wholly by its literature. Hellas was not necessarily more corrupted in the days of the Persian and Peloponnesian wars, or of Plato and the orators, than England in the time of Fielding and Smollett, or France in the 19th century. Is it Smollett or Smollett? I think it's Smollett. The Fielding of Fielding and Smollett. No one supposes certain French novels to be a representation of ordinary French life. And the greater part of Greek literature, beginning with Homer and including the tragedians, philosophers, and with the exception of the comic poets, whose business was to raise a laugh by whatever means, all the greatest writers of Hellas who have been preserved to us are free from the taint of indecency. Some general considerations occur to our mind when we begin to reflect on the subject. One, that good and evil are linked together in human nature, and have often existed side by side in the world and in man to an extent hardly credible. We cannot distinguish them and are therefore unable to part them. As in the parable, they grow together unto the harvest. It is only a rule of external decency by which society can divide them. Nor should we be right in inferring from the prevalence of any one vice or corruption that a state or individual is demoralized in their whole character. Not only has the corruption of the best been sometimes thought to be the worst, but it may be remarked that this very excess of evil has been the stimulus to good. It may be observed that evils which admit of degrees can seldom be rightly estimated, because under the same name actions of the most different degrees of culpability may be included. No charge is more easily set going than the imputation of secret wickedness, which cannot be either proved or disproved, and often cannot be defined, when directed against a person of whom the world, or a section of it, is predisposed to think evil. And it is quite possible that the malignity of Greek scandal, aroused by some personal jealousy or party enmity, may have converted the innocent friendship of a great man for a noble youth into a connection of another kind. Such accusations were brought against several of the leading men of Hellas: Simon, Alcibiades, Critias, Demosthenes, Epaminondas. Several of the Roman emperors were assailed by similar weapons, which have been used even in our own day against statesmen of the highest character. While we know that in this matter there is a great gulf fixed between Greek and Christian ethics, yet if we could do justice to the Greeks, we must also acknowledge that there was a greater outspokenness among them than among ourselves about the things which nature hides, and that the more frequent mention of such topics is not to be taken as the measure of the prevalence of offenses, or as proof of the general corruption of society. It is likely that every religion in the world has used words or practiced rites in one age, which have become distasteful or repugnant to another. We cannot, though, for different reasons, trust the representations either of comedy or satire, and still less of Christian apologists. We observe that at Thebes and Lacedaemon, the attachment of an elder friend to a beloved youth was often deemed to be a part of his education, and was encouraged by his parents. It was only shameful if it degenerated into licentiousness. Such we may believe to have been the tie which united Asophaicus and Cephisidorus with the great Epaminondas, in whose companionship they fell. A small matter, there appears to be a difference of custom among the Greeks and among ourselves, as between ourselves and continental nations at the present time, in modes of salutation. We must not suspect evil in the hearty kiss or embrace of a male friend returning from the army of Potidea, any more than in a similar salutation when practiced by members of the same family. But those who make these admissions, and who regard not without pity, the victims of such illusions in our own day, whose life has been blasted by them, may be nonetheless resolved that the natural and healthy instincts of mankind shall alone be tolerated, and that the lesson of manliness which we have inherited from our fathers shall not degenerate into sentimentalism or effeminacy. The possibility of an honorable connection of this kind seems to have died out with the Greek civilization. Among the Romans, and also among barbarians such as the Celts and Persians, there is no trace of such attachments existing in any noble or virtuous form. The character of Alcibiades in the Symposium is hardly less remarkable than that of Socrates, and agrees with the picture given of him in the first of the two dialogues which are called by his name, and also with the slight sketch of him in the Protagoras. He is the impersonation of lawlessness, the lion's whelp who ought not to be reared in the city, yet not without a certain generosity which gained the hearts of men, strangely fascinated by Socrates, and possessed of a genius which might have been either the destruction or salvation of Athens. The dramatic interest of the character is heightened by the recollection of his after-history. He seems to have been present to the mind of Plato in the description of the democratic man of the Republic. There is no criterion of the date of the Symposium, except that which is furnished by the allusion to the division of Arcadia after the destruction of Mantinea. This took place in the year BC 384, which is the 44th year of Plato's life. The Symposium cannot therefore be regarded as a youthful work. As Mantinea was restored in the year 369, the composition of the dialogue will probably fall between 384 and 369. Whether the recollection of the event is more likely to have been renewed at the destruction or restoration of the city, rather than at some intermediate period, is a consideration not worth raising. The Symposium is connected with the Phaedrus both in style and subject. They are the only dialogues of Plato in which the theme of love is discussed at length. In both of them, philosophy is regarded as a sort of enthusiasm or madness. Socrates is himself a prophet new inspired, with bacchanalian revelry, which, like his philosophy, he characteristically pretends to have derived not from himself, but from others. The Phaedo also presents some points of comparison with the Symposium, for there too, philosophy might be described as dying for love, and there are not wanting many touches of humor and fancy, which remind us of the Symposium. But while the Phaedo and Phaedrus looks backward and forwards to past and future states of existence, in the Symposium there is no break between this world and another, and we rise from one to the other by a regular series of steps or stages, proceeding from the particulars of sense to the universal of reason, and from one universal to many, which are finally reunited in a single science. At first, immortality means only the succession of existences. Even knowledge comes and goes. Then follows, in the language of the mysteries, a higher and higher degree of initiation. At last we arrive at the perfect vision of beauty, not relative or changing, but eternal and absolute, not bounded by this world or in or out of this world, but an aspect of the divine, extending over all things, and having no limit of space or time. This is the highest knowledge of which the human mind is capable. Plato does not go on to ask whether the individual is absorbed in the sea of light and beauty or retains his personality, enough for him to have attained the true beauty or good, without inquiring precisely into the relation in which human beings stood to it. That the soul has such a reach of thought, and is capable of partaking of the eternal nature, seems to imply that she too is eternal. But Plato does not distinguish the eternal in man from the eternal in the world or in God. He is willing to rest in the contemplation of the idea, which to him is the cause of all things, and has no strength to go further. The Symposium of Xenophon, in which Socrates describes himself as a pander, and also discourses of the difference between sensual and sentimental love, likewise offers several interesting points of comparison. But the suspicion which hangs over other writings of Xenophon, and the numerous minute references to the Phaedrus and the Symposium, as well as to some of the other writings of Plato, throw a doubt on the genuineness of the work. The Symposium of Xenophon, as written by him at all, would certainly show that he wrote against Plato and was acquainted with his works. Of his hostility there is no trace in the memorabilia. Such a rivalry is more characteristic of an imitator than of an original writer. The so-called Symposium of Xenophon may therefore have no more title to be regarded as genuine than the confessedly spurious Apology. There are no means of determining the relative order and time of the Phaedrus, Symposium, Phaedo. The order which has been adopted in this translation rests on no other principle than the desire to bring together in a series the memorial of the life of Socrates. Okay, that is the introduction of Plato's Symposium. Now, that took an hour and 20 minutes. Okay, that's fine. I'm a little parched and a bit peckish. Oh shit, he's okay with the gays? Does that just kind of say BL best love? Well, the Greeks were, you know, as open to interpretation, and in my interpretation at least, probably a little fruity with it. Probably because they just didn't really think about women very often, I guess. But also, a lot of this this translator, sorry, does a lot of his writing here in the introduction is spent explaining why it's not, you know, these Greek philosophers and thinkers didn't hang out with little boys. It's not what you think. They weren't romantically involved with them. They were DMing, but it was for educational reasons, and not, they weren't being groomed or whatever, you know, like etc. etc. That was the sort of defense that took a while to read through. Also, weren't they chill with guys being partners for life? Yeah. Make of that what you will. But, sorry, yeah. I'm going to go on a bit of a water and snack break. I will probably be back in, I want to say, 5 minutes. So, let me just... 5-minute break. Let me just do that. Is the translator French? I'm not sure. I don't think so, though. Where do you put text? Where the hell is it? I don't see it. There it is. No, that's not what I wanted to say. Snack and snack break. Okay. All right. Well, I'll be back very soon, I think. Oh, it's like, as in, like, it's, so it's iffy as to whether they were cool with the gays. Yeah. I think yes is a safe answer, but, you know, up to interpretation. But sorry, I'm a bit peckish, so I'm gonna go grab something. I'll be right back. Okay, we're back. We're back. With Symposium by Plato. Translation by Benjamin Jowett. This is not the version I read originally. Or, originally as in when I first encountered the text. But this is the one on Gutenberg.org. So I figured I would just use the version that's the most widely accessible. That's what I will do. From what I've read, ancient Greeks of the ancient Greeks is that they were fine with gay relationships as long as you are not a bottom and eventually have a wife and child. More an act of domination and pleasure than genuine love. That's pretty much my understanding of it as well. But I have a relatively limited understanding. So I rely on you to go out and research for your own understanding, okay? All right. Symposium by Plato. Persons of the dialogue. Apollodorus, who repeats to his companion the dialogue which he had heard from Aristodemus and had already once narrated to Glaucon. Phaedrus, Pausanias, Eryximachus, Aristophanes, Agathon, Socrates, Alcibiades, and a troop of revelers, seen the house of Agathon. Concerning the things about which you ask to be informed, I believe that I am not ill prepared with an answer. For the day before yesterday I was coming from my own home at Phalerum to the city, and one of my acquaintance, who had caught a sight of me from behind, calling out playfully in the distance, said, "Apollodorus, oh, thou Phalerian." Probably a play of words in Greek. "Thou Phalerian man, halt." So I did as I was bid, and then he said, "I was looking for you, Apollodorus, only just now that I might ask you about the speeches in praise of love, which were delivered by Socrates, Alcibiades, and others at Agathon's supper. Phoenix, the son of Philip, told another person who told me of them. His narrative was very indistinct, but he said that you knew, and I wish that you would give me an account of them. Who, if not you, should be the reporter of the words of your friend? And first tell me," he said, "were you present at this meeting?" "Your informant, Glaucon," I said, "must have been very indistinct indeed if you managed that the occasion was recent, or that I could have been of the party." "Why, yes," he replied, "I thought so." "Impossible," I said. "Are you ignorant that for many years Agathon has not resided at Athens, and not 3 have elapsed since I became acquainted with Socrates, and have made it my daily business to know all that he says and does? There was a time when I was running about the world fancying myself to be well employed, but I was really at most a wretched being, no better than you are now. I thought that I ought to do anything rather than be a philosopher." "Well," he said, jesting apart, "tell me when the meeting occurred." "In our boyhood," I replied, "when Agathon won the prize with his first tragedy. On the day after that, on which he and his chorus offered the sacrifice of victory." "Then it must have been a long while ago," he said. And who told you? Did Socrates?" "No, indeed," I replied, "but the same person who told Phoenix he was a little fellow who never wore any shoes, Aristodemus of the Dame of Cydothenium. He had been at Agathon's feast, and I think that in those days there was no one who was a more devoted admirer of Socrates. Moreover, I have asked Socrates about the truth of some parts of his narrative, and he confirmed them." "Then," said Glaucon, "let us have the tale over again. Is not the road to Athens just made for conversation?" And so we walked and talked of the discourses on love, and therefore, as I said at first, I am not ill prepared to comply with your request. And we'll have another rehearsal of them if you like. For to speak or to hear others speak of philosophy always gives me the greatest pleasure, to say nothing of the profit. But when I hear another strain, especially that of you rich men and traders, such conversation displeases me, And I pity you who are my companions, because you think that you are doing something when in reality you are doing nothing. And I dare say that you pity me in return, whom you regard as an unhappy creature, and very probably you are right. But I certainly know of you what you only think of me. There is the difference. Companion. Ah, I see. Apollodorus. That you are just the same, always speaking evil of yourself and of others, and I do believe that you pity all mankind, with the exception of Socrates. Yourself, first of all, true in this to your old name, which, however deserved, I know not how you acquired, of Apollodorus the madman, for you are always raging against yourself and everybody except Socrates. Yes, friend, and the reason why I am said to be mad and out of my wits is just because I have these notions of myself and you. No other evidence is required. No more of that, Apollodorus, but let me renew my request that you would repeat the conversation. Well, the tale of love was on this wise, but perhaps I'd better begin at the beginning, and endeavor to give you the exact words of Aristodemus. He said that he met Socrates fresh from the bath and sandaled, and as the sight of the sandals was unusual, he asked him whither he was going, that he had been converted into such a beau. To a banquet at Agathon's, he replied, whose invitation to a sacrifice of victory I refused yesterday, fearing a crowd, but promising that I will come today instead, and so I have put on my finery, because he is such a fine man. What say you to going with me unasked? I will do as you bid me, I replied. Follow then, he said, and let us demolish the proverb. To the feasts of inferior men the good unbidden go. Instead of which our proverb will run, to the feasts of the good unbidden go. And this alteration may be supported by the authority of Homer himself, who not only demolishes, but literally outrages the proverb. For after picturing Agamemnon as the most valiant of men, he makes Menelaus, who is but a faint-hearted warrior, come unbidden to the banquet of Agamemnon, who's feasting and offering sacrifices. Not the better to the worse, but the worse to the better. I rather fear, Socrates said, Aristodemus, lest this may still be my case, and that like Menelaus in Homer, I shall be the inferior person who, to the feasts of the wise and bidden goes. Then I shall say that I was bidden of you, and then you will have to make an excuse. Two going together, he replied in Homeric fashion. One or other of them may invent an excuse by the way. This was the style of their conversation as they went along. Socrates dropped behind in a fit of abstraction and desired Aristodemus, who was waiting, to go on before him. When he reached the house of Agathon, he found the doors wide open, and a comical thing happened. A servant coming out met him and led him at once into the banqueting hall, in which the guests were reclining, for the banquet was about to begin. Menelaus, yeah, that makes a lot more sense for me. I don't know why. There's a lot of Greek words in Platonic dialogues that I just forget that I should remember that sometimes when I'm speaking it aloud, because oftentimes I'm just reading it quietly, right? But anyways, Menelaus, okay. Welcome, Aristodemus, said Agathon, as soon as he appeared. You are just in time to sup with us. If you come on any other matter, put it off, and make one of us, as I was looking for you yesterday and meant to have asked you if I could have found you. Well, what have you done with Socrates? I turned round, but Socrates was nowhere to be seen, and I had to explain that he had been with me a moment before, and that I came by his invitation to the supper. You were quite right in coming, said Agathon, but where is he himself? He was behind me just now as I entered, he said, and I cannot think of what has become of him. Go and look for him, boy, said Agathon, and bring him in. And do you, Aristodemus, meanwhile take the place by Eryximachus. Listen to Epic the Musical so I can read Greek names perfectly. I've gotten many requests to dive into that. I don't know why. People really want me to talk about that, but I've not heard Epic the Musical yet. What I will say is the closest is I've played Hades, and so all the names in Hades I can do, and all the names that are not in Hades I can't do. The servant then assisted him to wash, and he lay down, and presently another servant came in and reported that our friend Socrates had retired into the portico of the neighboring house. There he is fixed, said he, and when I call to him he will not stir. How strange, said Agathon. Then you must call him again and keep calling him. Let him alone, said my informant. He has a way of stopping anywhere and losing himself without any reason. I believe that he will soon appear. Do not, therefore, disturb him. Well, if you think so, I will leave him, said Agathon. And then turning to the servants, he added, Let us have supper without waiting for him. Serve up whatever you please, for there is no one to give you orders. Hitherto I have never left you to yourselves. But on this occasion, imagine that you are our hosts, and that I and the company are your guests. Treat us well, and then we shall commend you. After this, supper was reserved. But still, no Socrates. And during the meal, Agathon several times expressed the wish to send for him, but Aristodemus objected. And at last, when the feast was about half over, for the fit, as usual, was not of long duration, Socrates entered. Agathon, who was reclining alone at the end of the table, begged that he would take the place next to him. That I may touch you, he said, and have the benefit of that wise thought which came into your mind in the portico, and is now in your possession, for I am certain that you would not have come away until you have found what you sought. How I wish, said Socrates, taking his place as he was desired, that wisdom could be infused by touch, out of the fuller into the emptier man, as water runs through wool out of a fuller cup into an emptier one. If that were so, how greatly should I value the privilege of reclining at your side, for you would have filled me with a stream of wisdom plenteous and fair, whereas my own is of a very mean and questionable sort, no better than a dream. But yours is bright and full of promise, and was manifested forth in all of the splendor of youth the day before yesterday, in the presence of more than 30,000 Hellenes. You are mocking, Socrates, said Agathon, and ere long you and I will have to determine who bears off the palm of wisdom. Of this Dionysus shall be the judge, but at present you are better occupied with supper. Socrates took his place on the couch and supped with the rest, and then libations were offered, and after a hymn had been sung to the god, and there had been the usual ceremonies, they were about to commence drinking when Pausanias said, And now, my friend, how can we drink with least injury to ourselves? I can assure you that I feel severely the effect of yesterday's potations, and must have time to recover. And I suspect that most of you are in the same predicament, for you were the party of yesterday. Consider then, how can the drinking be made easiest? I entirely agree, said Aristophanes, that we should by all means avoid hard drinking, for I was myself one of those who were yesterday drowned in drink. I think that you are right, said Eryximachus, the son of Acumenus, but I should still like to hear one other person speak. Is Agathon able to drink hard? I'm not equal to it, said Agathon. Then, said Eryximachus, the weak heads like myself, Aristodemus, Phaedrus, and others who never can drink, are fortunate in finding that the stronger ones are not in a drinking mood. I do not include Socrates, who is able either to drink or to abstain, and will not mind whichever we do. Well, as of none of the company seems disposed to drink much, I may be forgiven for saying, as a physician, that drinking deep is a bad practice, which I never follow, if I can help, and certainly do not recommend to another, least of all to anyone who still feels the effects of yesterday's carouse. I always do what you advise, and especially what you prescribe as a physician, rejoined Phaedrus the Myrenusian, and the rest of the company, if they are wise, will do the same. It was agreed that drinking was not to be the order of the day, but that they were all ready to drink only so much as they pleased. Then, said Eryximachus, as you are all agreed that drinking is to be voluntary, and that there is to be no compulsion, I move, in the next place, that the flute girl who has just made her appearance be told to go away and play to herself, or if she likes to the women who are within. Today let us have conversation instead, and if you will allow me, I will tell you what sort of conversation. This proposal having been accepted, Eryximachus proceeds as follows. I will begin, he said, after the manner of Melanippe and Euripides. Not mind the word, which I am about to speak, but that of Phaedrus. For often he says to me in an indignant tone, What a strange thing it is, Eryximachus, that whereas other gods have poems and hymns made in their honor, the great and glorious god Love has no encomiast among all the poets who are so many. There are the worthy sophists too, the excellent Prodicus, for example, who have descanted in prose on the virtues of Heracles and other heroes. And what is still more extraordinary, I have met with a philosophical work in which the utility of salt has been made the theme of an eloquent discourse, and many other things like that have had a like honor bestowed upon them, and only to think that there should have been an eager interest created about them, and yet that to this day no one has ever dared worthily to hymn love's praises. So I think like the translation here has decided to use the word love instead of eros. I'm not sure why. I'm gonna stick with this version anyways, but I think that's supposed to be Eros. Think. Anyways. So entirely has this great deity been neglected. Now in this Phaedrus seems to me to be quite right, and therefore I want to offer him a contribution. Also, I think that at the present moment, we who are here assembled cannot do better than honor the god of love. If you agree with me, there will be no lack of conversation, for I mean to propose that each of us in turn, going from left to right, shall make a speech in honor of love. Let him give us the best which he can, and Phaedrus, because he is sitting first on the left hand, and because he is the father of the thought, shall begin. No one will vote against you, Eryximachus. Socrates, how can I oppose your motion, who profess to understand nothing but matters of love, nor, I presume, will Agathon and Pausanias, and there can be no doubt of Aristophanes, whose whole concern is with Dionysus and Aphrodite, nor will anyone disagree of those whom I see around me. The proposal, as I am aware, may seem rather hard upon us whose place is last, but we shall be contented if we hear some good speeches first. Let Phaedrus begin the praise of love, and good luck to him. All the company expressed their assent, and desired him to do as Socrates bade him. Aristodemus did not recollect all that was said, nor do I recollect all that he related to me, but I will tell you what I thought most worthy of remembrance and what the chief speaker said. Yeah, it should be Aristodemus instead of... Alright, okay. Sorry. Phaedrus began by affirming that love is a mighty god, and wonderful god among wonderful among gods and men, but especially wonderful in its birth, for he is the eldest of the gods, which is an honor to him, and a proof of his claim to his honor is that of his parents there is no memorial. Neither poet nor prose writer has ever affirmed that he had any. As Hesiod says, first chaos came, and then broad-bosomed earth, the everlasting seat of all that is, and love. In other words, after chaos, the earth and love, these two came into being. Also, Parmenides sings of generation. First in the train of gods he fashioned love. And Eceusalus agrees with Hesiod. Thus, numerous are the witnesses who acknowledge love to be the eldest of the gods. And not only is he the eldest, he is also the source of the greatest benefits to us. For I know not any greater blessing to a young man who is beginning life than a virtuous lover, or to the lover than a beloved youth. For the principle which ought to be the guide of men who would nobly live, the principle, I say it, neither kindred nor honor nor wealth, nor any other motive is able to implant so well as love. Of what am I speaking? Of the sense of honor and dishonor, without which neither states nor individuals ever do any good or great work? And I say that a lover who is detected in doing any dishonorable act, or submitting through cowardice when any dishonor is done to him by another, will be more pained at being detected by his beloved than at being seen by his father, or by his companions, or by anyone else. The beloved, too, when he is found in any disgraceful situation, has the same feeling about his lover. And if there were only some way of contriving that a state or an army should be made up of lovers and their loves, they would be the very best governors of their own city, abstaining from all dishonor, and emulating one another in honor. And when fighting at each other's side, although a mere handful, they would overcome the world. For what lover would not choose rather to be seen by all mankind than by his beloved, either when abandoning his post or throwing away his arms? He would be ready to die 1,000 deaths rather than endure this. Or who would desert his beloved or fail him in the hour of danger? The veriest coward would become an inspired hero, equal to the bravest at such a time. Love would inspire him. That courage, which, as Homer says, the god breathes into the souls of some heroes, love of his own nature infuses into the lover. Love will make men dare to die for their beloved. Love alone, and women as well as men. Of this, Alcestis, the daughter of Peleus, is a monument to all Hellas, for she was willing to lay down her life on behalf of her husband, but no one else would, although he had a father and mother, but the tenderness of her love so far exceeded theirs that she made them seem to be strangers in blood to their own son, and in name only related to him. And so noble did this action of hers appear to the gods as well as to men, that among the many who have done virtuously, she is one of the very few to whom, in admiration of her noble action, they have granted the privilege of returning alive to earth. Such exceeding honor is paid by the gods to the devotion and virtue of love. But Orpheus, the son of Oeagrus, the harper, they sent empty away, and presented to him an apparition only of her whom he sought, but herself they would not give up, because he showed no spirit. He was only a harp player, and I did not dare, like Alcestis, to die for love, but was contriving how he might enter Hades alive. Moreover, they afterwards caused him to suffer death at the hands of women, as the punishment of his cowardliness. Very different was the reward of the true love of Achilles towards his lover Patroclus. His lover his lover, and not his love. The notion that Patroclus was the beloved one is a foolish error into which Aeschylus has fallen, for Achilles was surely the fairer of the two, fairer also than all the other heroes, and as Homer informs us, he was still beardless and younger far. And greatly as the gods honor the virtue of love, still the return of love on the part of the beloved to the lover is more admired and valued and rewarded by them. For the lover is more divine, because he is inspired by God. Now Achilles was quite aware, for he had been told by his mother that he might avoid death and return home, and live to a good old age, if he abstained from slaying Hector. Nevertheless, he gave his life to revenge his friend, and dared to die not only in his defense but after he was dead. Wherefore the gods honored him even above Alcestis, and sent him to the islands of the blessed. These are my reasons for affirming that love is the eldest and noblest and mightiest of the gods, and the chiefest author and giver of virtue in life, and of happiness, death. Excuse me. Sorry. This, or something like this, was the speech of Phaedrus, and some other speeches followed which Aristodemus did not remember. The next which he repeated was that of Pausanias. Phaedrus, he said, the argument has not been set before us. I think quite in the right form. We should not be called upon to praise love in such an indiscriminate manner. If there were only one love, then what you said would be well enough. But since there are more loves than one, should have begun by determining which of them was to be the theme of our praises. I will amend this defect. And first of all, I will tell you which love is deserving of praise, and then try to hymn the praiseworthy one in a manner worthy of him. For we all know that love is inseparable from Aphrodite, and if there were only one Aphrodite, there would be only one love. But as there are two goddesses, there must be two loves, and I'm not right in asserting that there are two goddesses. The elder one having no mother, who is called the heavenly Aphrodite, she is the daughter of Uranus. The younger, who is the daughter of Zeus and Dione, her we call common, and the love who is her fellow worker is rightly named common, as the other love is called heavenly. All the gods ought to have praises given to them, but not without distinction of their natures, and therefore I must try to distinguish the characters of the two loves. Now, actions vary according to the manner of their performance. Take, for example, that which we are now doing, drinking, singing, and talking. These actions are not in themselves either good or evil, but they turn out in this or that way according to the mode of performing them, and when well done they are good, and when wrongly done they are evil. And in like manner, not every love, but only that which has a noble purpose, is noble and worthy of praise. The love who is of the offspring of the common Aphrodite is essentially common, and has no discrimination, being such as the meaner sort of men feel, and is apt to be of women as well as of youths, and is of the body rather than of the soul. The most foolish beings are the objects of this love, which desires only to gain an end, but never thinks of accomplishing the end nobly, and therefore does good and evil quite indiscriminately. The goddess who is his mother is far younger than the other, and she was born of the union of the male and female, and partakes of both. For the offspring of the heavenly Aphrodite is derived from a mother in whose birth the female is no part. She is from the male only. This is that love which is of youths, and the goddess being older, there is nothing of wantonness in her. Those who are inspired by this love turn to the male, and delight in him who is the more valiant and intelligent nature. Anyone may recognize the pure enthusiasts in the very character of their attachments. For they love not boys, but intelligent beings whose reason is beginning to be developed, much about the time at which their beards begin to grow. And in choosing young men to be their companions, they mean to be faithful to them, and pass their whole life in company with them, not to take them in their inexperience, and deceive them and play the fool with them, or run away from one another of them. But the love of young boys should be forbidden by law, because their future is uncertain. They may turn out good or bad, either in body or soul, and much noble enthusiasm may be thrown away upon them. In this matter, the good are a law to themselves, and this coarser sort of lovers ought to be restrained by force, as we restrain or attempt to restrain them from fixing lawfulness of such attachments, because they see the impropriety and evil of them. For surely nothing that is decorously and lawfully done can justly be censured. Now here and in Lacedaemon, the rules about love are perplexing, but in most cities they are simple and easily intelligible. in Hellas and Boeotia, and in countries having no gifts of eloquence. They are very straightforward. The law is simply in favor of these connections, and no one, whether young or old, has anything to say to their discredit. The reason being, I suppose, that they are men of few words in those parts, and therefore the lovers do not like the trouble of pleading their suit. In Ionia and other places, and generally in countries which are subject to the barbarians, the custom is held to be dishonorable. Loves of youths share the evil repute in which philosophy and gymnastics are held, because they are inimical to tyranny. For the interests of rulers requires that their subjects should be poor in spirit, and that there should be no strong bond of friendship or society among them, which love above all other motives is likely to inspire, as our Athenian tyrants learned by experience. For the love of Aristogiton and the constancy of Harmodius had a strength which undid their power, and therefore the ill repute into which these attachments have fallen is to be ascribed to the evil condition of those who make them to be ill reputed. That is to say, to the self-seeking of the governors and the cowardice of the governed. On the other hand, the indiscriminate honor which is given to them in some countries is attributable to the laziness of those who hold this opinion of them. In our own country, a far better principle prevails, but, as I was saying, the explanation of it is rather perplexing. For observe that open loves are held to be more honorable than secret ones, and that the love of the noblest and highest, even if their persons are less beautiful than others, is especially honorable. Consider, too, how great is the encouragement which all the world gives to the lover. Neither is he supposed to be doing anything dishonorable, but if he succeeds, he is praised, and if he fails, he is blamed. And in the pursuit of his love, the custom of mankind allows him to do many strange things, which philosophy would bitterly censure if they were done from any of the motive of interest, or wish for office or power. He may pray and entreat and supplicate and swear and lie on a mat at the door, and endure a slavery worse than that of any slave. In any other case, friends and enemies would be equally ready to prevent him. But now there is no friend who will be ashamed of him and admonish him, and no enemy will charge him with meanness or flattery. The actions of a lover have a grace which ennobles them, and custom has decided that they are highly commendable, and that there are no loss of character in them. And what is strangest of all, he only may swear and forswear himself, so men say, and the gods will forgive his transgression. For there is no such thing as a lover's oath. Such is the entire liberty which gods and men have allowed the lover, according to the custom which prevails in our part of the world. From this point of view, a man fairly argues that in Athens to love and to be loved is held to be a very honorable thing. But when parents forbid their sons to talk with their lovers, and place them under a tutor's care, who is appointed to see to those things, and their companions and equals cast in their teeth anything of the sort which they may observe, and their elders refuse to silence the reprovers and do not rebuke them, anyone who reflects on all this will, on the contrary, think that we hold these practices to be most disgraceful. But as I was saying at first, the truth, as I imagine, is that whether such practices are honorable or whether they are dishonorable is not a simple question. They are honorable to him who follows them honorably, dishonorable to him who follows them dishonorably. There is dishonor in yielding to the evil, or in an evil manner, but there is honor in yielding to the good, or in an honorable manner. Evil is the vulgar lover who loves the body rather than the soul, inasmuch as he is not even astable, because he loves a thing which is in itself unstable, and therefore when the bloom of youth which he was desiring is over, he takes wing and flies away, in spite of all his words and promises. Whereas the love of the noble disposition is lifelong, for it becomes one with the everlasting. The custom of our country would have both of them proven well and truly, and would have us yield to the one sort of lover and avoid the other, and therefore encourages some to pursue and others to fly, testing both the lover and beloved in contests and trials, until they show to which of the two classes they respectively belong. And this is the reason why, in the first place, a hasty attachment is held to be dishonorable, because time is the true test of this as of most other things. And secondly, there is a dishonor in being overcome by the love of money, or of wealth, or of political power, whether a man is frightened into surrender by the loss of them, or having experienced the benefits of money and political corruption, is unable to rise above the seductions of them. For none of these things are of a permanent or lasting nature, not to mention that no generous friendship ever sprang from them. There remains then only one way of honorable attachment, which custom allows in their beloved, and this is the way of virtue. For as we admitted that any service which the lover does to him is not to be accounted flattery or dishonor to himself, so the beloved has one way only of voluntary service, which is not dishonorable, and this is virtuous service. For we have a custom And according to our custom, anyone who doesn't service to another under the idea that he will be improved by him either in wisdom or in some other particular of virtue, such a voluntary service, I say, is not to be regarded as a dishonor, and is not open to the charge of flattery. And these two customs, one the love of youth and the other the practice of philosophy and virtue in general, ought to meet in one, and then the beloved may honorably indulge the lover. For when the lover and beloved come together, having each of them a law, and the lover thinks that he is right in doing any service which he can to his gracious, loving one, and the other that he is right in showing any kindness which he can to him, who is making him wise and good, the one capable of communicating wisdom and virtue, the other seeking to acquire them with a view to education and wisdom, when the two laws of love are fulfilled and meet in one, then and then only may the beloved yield with honor to the lover. Nor when love is of this disinterested sort is there any disgrace in being deceived, but in every other case there is an equal disgrace in being or not being deceived. For he who is gracious to his lover under the impression that he is rich, and is disappointed of his gains because he turns out to be poor, is disgraced all the same, for he has done his best to show that he would give himself up to anyone's uses base for the sake of money, but this is not honorable. And on the same principle, he who gives himself to a lover because he is a good man, and in the hope that he will be improved by his company, shows himself to be virtuous, even though the object of his affection turned out to be a villain, and to have no virtue, and if he is deceived, he has committed a noble error. For he has proved that for his part he will do anything for anybody, with a view to virtue and improvement, than which there can be nothing nobler. Thus noble in every case is the acceptance of another for the sake of virtue. This is that love which is the love of the heavenly goddess, and is heavenly, and of great price to individuals and cities, making the lover and the beloved alike eager in the work of their own improvement. But all other loves are the offspring of the other, who is the common goddess. To you, Phaedrus, I offer this my contribution in praise of love, which is as good as I could make extempore. Pausanias came to a pause. This is the balanced way in which I have been taught by the wise to speak, and Aristodemus said that the turn of Aristophanes was next, but either he had eaten too much or, from some other cause, he had the hiccough, and was obliged to change turns with Eryximachus, the physician, who was reclining on the couch below him. Eryximachus, he said, you ought either to stop my hiccough or to speak in my turn until I have left off. I will do both, said Eryximachus. I will speak in your turn, and do you speak in mine. And while I am speaking, let me recommend you to hold your breath, and if after you have done so for some time the hiccough is no better, then gargle with a little water. And if it still continues, tickle your nose with something and sneeze. And if you sneeze once or twice, even the most violent hiccough is sure to go. I will do as you prescribe, said Aristophanes. Now get on. Eryximachus spoke as follows. Seeing that Pausanias made a fair beginning, but a lame ending, I must endeavor to supply his deficiency. I think that he has rightly distinguished two kinds of love. But my art further informs me that the double love is not merely an affection of the soul of man towards the fair or towards anything, but is to be found in the bodies of all animals and in the productions of the earth. And I may say in all that is, such is the conclusion which I seem to have gathered from my own art of medicine, whence I learned how great and wonderful and universal is the deity of love, whose empire extends over all things, divine as well as human. And for medicine I will begin that I may do honor to my art. There are in the human body those two kinds of love, which are confessedly different and unlike, and being unlike, they have loves and desires which are unlike, and the desire of the healthy is one, and the desire of the diseased is another. And as Pausanias was just now saying that to indulge good men is honorable, and bad men dishonorable, so too in the body the good and healthy elements are to be indulged, and the bad elements and the elements of disease are not to be indulged, but discouraged. And this is what the physician has to do. And in this the art of medicine consists. For medicine may be regarded generally as the knowledge of the loves and desires of the body, and how to satisfy them or not. And the best physician is he who is able to separate fair love from foul, or to convert one into the other. And he who knows how to eradicate and how to implant love, whichever is required, and can reconcile the most hostile elements in the constitution and making them loving friends, is a skillful practitioner. Now the most hostile are the most opposite, such as hot and cold, bitter and sweet, moist and dry, and the like. And my ancestor Asclepius, knowing how to implant friendship and accord in these elements, was the creator of our art, as our friends the poets here tell us, and I believe them, and not only medicine in every branch, but the arts of gymnastic and husbandry are under his dominion. Anyone who pays the least attention to this subject will also perceive that in music there is the same reconciliation of opposites, and I suppose that this must have been the meaning of Heraclitus, although his words are not accurate, for he says that the one is united by disunion, like the harmony of the bow and the lyre. Now there is an absurdity saying that harmony is discord, or is composed of elements which are still in a state of discord, but what he probably meant was that harmony is composed of differing notes of higher or lower pitch with disagreed ones, but are now reconciled by the art of music. For if the higher and lower notes are still disagreed, there can be no harmony, clearly not. For harmony is a symphony, and symphony is an agreement. But an agreement of disagreements while they disagree there cannot be. You cannot harmonize that which disagrees. In like manner, rhythm is compounded of elements short and long, once differing and now in accord, which accordance, as in the former instance, medicine, so in all these other cases, music and plants, making love, and unison to grow the essential nature of harmony and rhythm, there is no difficulty in discerning love, which has not yet become doable. But when you want to use them in actual life, either in the composition of songs or in the correct performance of airs or meters composed already, which latter is called education, then the difficulty begins, and the good artist is needed. Then the old tales to be repeated of fair yet intemperate only that they may become temperate, and of preserving. Then the old tale has to be repeated of fair and heavenly love, the love of Urania the fair and heavenly muse, and of the duty of accepting the temperate, and those who are as yet intemperate only that they may become temperate, and of preserving their love, and again of the vulgar polyhymnia, who must be used with circumspection that the pleasure be enjoyed, but may not degenerate licentiousness. Just as in my own art it is a great matter so to regulate the desires of the epicure, that he may gratify his tastes without the attendant evil of disease. Whence I infer that in music, in medicine, in all the things human as well as divine, both loves ought to be noted as far as may be, for they are both present. The course of the seasons is also full of both these principles. And when I was saying, elements of hot and cold, moist and dry, attain the harmonious love of one another and blend in temperance and harmony, they bring to men, animals and plants, health and plenty, and do them no harm. Whereas the wanton love, getting the upper hand in affecting the seasons of the year, is very destructive and injurious, being the source of pestilence and bringing many other kinds of diseases on animals and plants. For hoarfrost and hail and blight spring from the excesses and disorders of these elements of love, which, to know in relation to the revolutions of the heavenly bodies and the seasons of the year, is termed astronomy. Furthermore, all sacrifices and the whole province of divination, which is the art of communion between God and men, these, I say, are concerned only with the preservation of the harmonious love. With the preservation of the good and the cure of the evil love. For all manner of impiety is likely to ensue if, instead of accepting and honoring and reverencing the harmonious love in all his actions, a man honors the other love, whether in his feelings towards gods or parents, towards the living or the dead. Wherefore the business of divination is to see to these loves and to heal them, and divination is the peacemaker of gods and men, working by a knowledge of the religious or irreligious tendencies which exist in human loves. Such is a great and mighty, or rather important force, omnipotent force, of love in general. And the love more especially which is concerned with the good, which is perfected in company with temperance and justice, whether among gods or men, has the greatest power, and is the source of all our happiness and harmony, and makes us friends with the gods who are above us and with one another. I dare say that I too have omitted several things which might be said in praise of love, but this was not intentional, and you, Aristophanes, may now supply the omission or take some other line of commendation, for I perceive that you are rid of hiccough. Yes, said Aristophanes, who followed, the hiccough is gone. Not, however, until I applied the sneezing, and I wonder whether the harmony of the body has a love of such noises and ticklings, for I no sooner applied the sneezing than I was cured. Arximachus said, beware, friend Aristophanes, although you are going to speak, you are making fun of me, and I shall have to watch and see whether I can have a laugh at your expense, when you might speak in peace. You are right, said Aristophanes, laughing. I will unsay my words, but do you please not to watch me, as I fear then the speech which I am about to make, instead of others laughing with me, which is to the manner born of our muse and would be all the better, I shall only be laughed at by them. Do you expect to shoot your bolt and escape, Aristophanes? Well, perhaps if you are very careful and bear in mind that you will be called to account, I may be induced to let you off. Aristophanes professed to another vein of discourse. He had a mind to praise love in another way, unlike that either Pausanias or Eryximachus. Mankind, he said, judging by their neglect of him, have never, as I think, at all understood the power of love. Excuse me. For if they had understood him, they would surely have built noble temples and altars, and offered solemn sacrifices in his honor. But this is not done, and most certainly ought to be done. Since all of the gods he is the best friend of men, the helper, and the healer of the ills which are the great impediment to the happiness of the race. I will try to describe his power to you, and you shall teach the rest of the world what I am teaching you. In the first place, let me treat of the nature of man and what has happened for it. For the original human nature was not like the present, but different. The sexes were not two, as they are now, but originally three in existence. But it is now lost, and the word androgynous is only preserved as a term of reproach. In the second place, the primeval man was round. In the second place, the primeval man was round, his back and sides forming a circle, and he had 4 hands and 4 feet. One head with 2 faces, looking opposite ways, set on a round neck and precisely alike. Also 4 ears, 2 privy members, and the remainder to correspond. He would walk upright, as men do now, backwards or forwards as he pleased, and he could also roll over and over at a great pace, turning on his 4 hands and 4 feet, 8 in all, like tumblers going over and over with their legs in the air. This was when he wanted to run fast. Now the sexes were 3, and such as I have described them, because the sun, moon, and earth are 3, and the man was originally the child of the sun, the woman of the earth, and the man woman of the moon, which is made up of sun and earth, and they were all round and moved round and round like their parents. Terrible was their might and strength, the thoughts of their hearts were great, and they made an attack upon the gods. Of them is told the tale of Otis and Ephialtes, who, as Homer says, dared to scale heaven and would have laid hands upon the gods. Doubt reigned in the celestial councils. Should they kill them and annihilate the race with thunderbolts, as they had done the giants, then there would be an end of the sacrifices and worship which men offered to them. But on the other hand, the gods could not suffer their insolence to be unrestrained. At last, after a good deal of reflection, Zeus discovered a way. He said, "Methinks I have a plan which will humble their pride and improve their manners. Men shall continue to exist, but I will cut them up in 2, and they will be diminished in strength and increased in numbers. This will have the advantage of making them more profitable to us. They shall walk upright on 2 legs, and if they continue insolent and will not be quiet, I will split them again, and they will hop around on 1. He spoke and cut men in 2, like a sorbed apple which is halved for pickling, or as you might divide an egg with a hair, as he cuts them one after another. He bade Apollo give the face and the half of the neck a turn in their wounds and compose their forms, So he gave a turn to the face and pulled the skin from the sides all over that which in our language is called the belly, like the purses which draw in, and he made one mouth at the center, which he fastened in a knot, the same which we call the navel. He also molded the breast and took out most of the wrinkles, much as a shoemaker might smooth leather upon a last. He left a few, however, in the region of the belly and navel, as a memorial of the primeval state. After the division of the 2 parts of man, each desiring his other half, came together and throwing their arms around one another, entwined in mutual embraces, longing to grow into one, they were on the point of dying from hunger and self-neglect, because they did not like to do anything apart. And when one of the halves died and the other survived, the survivor sought another mate, man or woman as we call them, being the sections of entire men or women, and clung to that. They were being destroyed when Zeus, in pity of them, the seed no longer as hitherto like grasshoppers in the ground, but in one another. And after the transposition, the male generated in the female in order that the that by the mutual embraces of man and woman they might breed, and the race might continue, or if man came to man, they might be satisfied and rest and go their ways to the business of life. So ancient is the desire for one another which is implanted in us, reuniting our original nature, making one of two, and healing the state of man. For each of us when separated, are we? Each of us when separated, having one side only, like a flat fish, is but the indenture of a man, and he is always looking for his other half. Men who are a section of that double nature, which was once called androgynous, are lovers of women. Adulterers are generally of this breed, and also adulterous women who lust after men. The women who are a section of the women who do not care for men, but have female attachments, the female companions are of this sort. But they who are a section of the male follow the male, and while they are young, being slices of the original man, they hang about men and embrace them, and they are themselves the best of boys in youth, because they have the most manly nature. Some indeed assert that they are shameless, but this is not true, for they do not act thus from any want of shame, mostly manly nature. Some indeed assert that they are shameless, but this is not true, for they do not act thus from any want of shame, but because they are valiant and manly, and have a manly countenance, and they embrace that which is like them. And these when they grow up become our statesmen, and these only, which is a great proof of the truth of what I am saving, when they reach manhood, they are lovers of youth, and are not naturally inclined to marry or beget children. If at all, they do so only in an obedience to the law, but they are satisfied if they may be allowed to live with one another and wedded. And such a nature is prone to love and ready to return love, always embracing that which is akin to him. And when one of them meets with his other half, the actual half of himself, whether he be a lover of youth or a lover of another sort, the pair are lost in an amazement of love and friendship and intimacy. And one will not be out of the other's sight. As I may say, even for a moment, these are the people who pass their whole lives together. Yet they could not explain what they desire of one another. For the intense yearning which each of them has towards the other does not appear to be the desire of lovers' intercourse, but of something else which the soul of either evidently desires and cannot tell, and of which she has only a dark and doubtful presentiment. Suppose Hephaestus, with his instruments, to come to the pair who are lying side by side and to say to them, "What do you people want of one another?" They would be unable to explain. And suppose further, that when he saw their perplexity, he said, "Do you desire to be wholly one, always day and night to be in one another's company? For if this is what you desire, I am ready to melt you into one and let you grow together, so that being two, you shall become one. And while you live a common life as if you were a single man, and after your death in the world below still be one departed soul instead of two, I ask whether this is what you lovingly desire, and whether you are satisfied to attain this." There is not a man of them who, when he heard the proposal, would deny or would not acknowledge that this meeting and melting into one another, this becoming one instead of two, was the very expression of his ancient need. And the reason is that human nature was originally one, and we were a whole. And the desire and pursuit of the whole is called love. There was a time, I say, when we were one. But now because of the wickedness of mankind, God has dispersed us, as the Arcadians were dispersed into villages by the Lacedaemonians. And if we are not obedient to the gods, there is a danger that we shall be split up again and go about in basso relievo, like the profile figures having only half a nose which are sculptured on monuments, and that we shall be like tallies. Whether let us exhort all men to piety, that we may avoid evil and obtain the good, of which love is to us, the Lord and Minister. And let no one oppose him, he is the enemy of the gods who opposes him. For if we are friends of the God, and at peace with him we shall find our own true loves, which rarely happens in this world at present. I'm serious, and therefore I must beg Eryximachus not to make fun of, or to find any allusion in what I'm saying to Pausanias and Agathon, who, as I suspect, are both of the manly nature, and belong to the class which I have been describing. But my words have a wider application. They include men and women everywhere. And I believe that if our loves were perfectly accomplished, and each one returning to its primeval nature and had his original true love, then our race would be happy. And if this would be best of all, the best in the next degree, and under present circumstances must be the nearest approach to such a union, and that will be the attainment of a congenial love. Wherefore, if we would praise him who has given to us the benefit, we must praise the God Love, who is our greatest benefactor, both leading us into this life back to our own nature and giving us high hopes for the future. For he promises that if we are pious, he will restore us to our original state and heal us and make us happy and blessed. This, Eryximachus, is my discourse of love, which, although different to yours, I must beg you to leave unassailed by the shafts of your ridicule, in order that each may have his turn. Each, or rather either, for Agathon and Socrates are the only ones left. Indeed, I'm not going to attack you, said Eryximachus, for I thought your speech charming, and I did not know that Agathon and Socrates are masters in the art of love. I should be really afraid that they would have nothing to say, after the world of things which have been said already, but for all that, I'm not without hopes. Socrates said, you played your part well, Eryximachus. But if you are as I am now, or rather as I shall be when Agathon has spoken, you would indeed be in a great strait. What were they talking about, lesbians? Not in a very good way, unfortunately, so, yeah. Socrates said, you played your part well, Eryximachus. But if you were as I am now, or rather as I shall be when Agathon has spoken, you would indeed be in a great strait. You want to cast a spell over me, Socrates, said Agathon, in the hope that I may be disconcerted at the expectation raised among the audience that I shall speak well. I shall be strangely forgetful, Agathon replied Socrates, of the courage and magnanimity which you showed when your own compositions were about to be exhibited, and you came upon the stage with the actors and faced the vast theatre altogether undismayed, if I thought that your nerves could be fluttered at a small party of friends. Do you think, Socrates, said Agathon, that my head is so full of the theatre as to not know how much more formidable to a man of sense a few good judges are than many fools? Nay, replied Socrates, I should be very wrong in attributing to you, Agathon, that or any other want of refinement. And I am quite aware that if you happened to meet with any whom you thought wise, you would care for their opinion much more than for that of the many. But then we, having been a part of the foolish many in the theatre, cannot be regarded as the select wise, though I know that if you chanced to be in the presence, not of one of ourselves, but of some really wise man, you would be ashamed of disgracing yourself before him. Would you not? Yes, said Agathon. Hang on. Chairman, hello. Hi, Professor. Lactax. Welcome to the stream. I'm doing Symposium by Plato. That's what we're doing. It's been a while since I've had a reading stream, so that's what we're doing today. But before the many you would not be ashamed if you thought that you were doing something disgraceful in their presence. Here Phaedrus interrupted them, saying, not answer him, my dear Agathon, for if he can only get a partner with whom he can talk, especially a good-looking one, he will no longer care about the completion of our plan. Now I love to hear him talk, but just at present I must not forget the encomium on love, which I ought to receive from him and from everyone. When you and he have paid your tribute to the god, you may talk. Very good, Phaedrus, said Agathon. I see no reason why I should not proceed with my speech, as I shall have many other opportunities for conversing with Socrates. Let me say first how I ought to speak, and then speak. I just want to see how I don't quite remember how much is left. Okay, quite a bit is left. Where was I? What? I've missed it. I thought I highlighted it. Excuse me, here I am. Yeah. Okay, so I'm about halfway through Symposium. It's been 2.5 hours so far. I'm going to continue tomorrow. Sorry. I'm a little, I'm in a bit of a daze today. I will continue tomorrow. I'll do the rest of it. And I don't want to, because I feel like the more tired I am when I'm trying to, you know, read text, especially with words that I don't remember how to pronounce, it trips me up and it makes it a lot worse and makes it not a great listening experience. Because I'm just kind of like going, oh, how do you pronounce that? And then I'm taking a pause and then I pronounce it like differently from the last time I do it, and both those times it's incorrect. I'm gonna head off now. Today's stream relatively short. I'm gonna do, I was supposed to take a break tomorrow. I was supposed to spend time tomorrow preparing for the stream the day after. But, well, I forgot how long this dialogue is. But tomorrow I'll stream again, even though it's not a schedule, and I'm just gonna continue this bit. I know you just joined, but you know, like, it's bad timing. Apologies. But yeah, I'm going to you can go back to the VOD, it's fine. But I'm going to go now. And tomorrow we're gonna finish up Symposium. Could be good too, because now then I'll have a bit more time to form my thoughts on Symposium before I kind of give a brief answer. The case? Anyways. I grow quite a bit tired, I will not lie. My eyes were flickering as I was reading it. It definitely doesn't help that, like, my RAM is not there when I have to load Greek names, which, you know, by all accounts, is ridiculous considering the fact that my name is Greek. That I'm taking so long to, like, familiarize myself with the Greek words in these texts, but it is what it is, right? It is what it is. Okay, that's all. I'll see everyone next stream tomorrow for the rest of Plato Symposium. Day after, we're gonna do where I'm gonna talk about the male loneliness epidemic briefly, and which is all kind of a bit, you know, I have to do it. I don't think it'll be too fun. It's gonna be a little sad, but it's like necessary, and I think hopefully it's interesting. But then after that, we're gonna play Wanderstop, which is a video game, and I can't wait to play a video game. Very hyped about that. But yes, I miss stream tomorrow. I mean, if you miss it tomorrow, you miss it tomorrow. People got shit to do, right? Want to know more about the gay Socrates fanfic? There is a lot of gay Greek fanfic. There's a lot of gay Greek fic. There is not that much gay Socrates fanfic, I think. It's like, you know, who do you ship him with? His student? That's kind of weird. You don't do that. Anyways, that's all from me. I will see everyone tomorrow for Plato Symposium 2 Electric Boogaloo, and hopefully I'll schedule the stream earlier so you can actually see it, not just 3 hours before I go live, but that will happen. So goodbye.